This is our work, Expressive Clothing, Understanding Hobbyist-Sewers' Visions for Self-Expression Through Clothing. Clothes are an expressive medium that facilitate the communication of ideas, opinions, and emotions through the use of textile-based encodings. Many individuals, ranging from hobbyists to professionals, engage in the practices of sewing clothes as a means of self-expression. Meet Abby. Abby is a graduate student in medical science who is also a hobbyist sewer. As a medical student, she's interested in exploring ways to communicate healthcare information to the broader public. Given the recent pandemic, this is a topic of growing interest to Abby. As a hobbyist sewer, Abby wants to use clothes to communicate healthcare knowledge to others. Later in this presentation, we'll return to Abby to learn more about how she tries to incorporate information about the pandemic into a t-shirt. To explore expressive clothing, we build on literature from the fields of fashion, HCI, and the social sciences. From fashion and the social sciences, we know that clothes are often embedded with social meanings using encodings like colors and icons. Clothes have been used in the past as objects that support self-expression, like showcasing personal preferences, communication with spectators, and community development, like through the use of uniforms. For example, clothes can be used to pass down stories or generational knowledge within a cultural community. They can be used to educate others and demonstrate group associations, and they can be used to convey a sense of pride and relationships to the land or culture. So we know that people use encodings like colors and icons on clothes to communicate in many contexts, but what we don't know is what and why people want to communicate, and how and why they select ways to encode information. People in HCI have explored many textile-based encodings, like patched or mended textiles, to e-textile components that support interactive embroidery, shape-changing fabrics, and embedded sensors, receivers, and actuators. A lot of the focus here has been on either the introduction of low barrier of entry toolkits for learning how to engage with wearable electronics, such as LilyPad, or on the development of technologies to aid the technical aspects of sewing, such as pattern development and garment visualization. Inspired by existing knowledge, we take an exploratory approach using the case study of hobbyist sewers and expressive clothing. We aim to understand how individuals can be guided through the creative process of articulating their concepts and ideas. Within our case study, we explore how hobbyist sewers want to express information through clothing, and we identify opportunities for designing technologies that can support these creative pursuits. We ran a remote study with 12 female identifying hobbyist sewers that was broken into 3 phases over a 5-day period. In the first phase, participants engaged in a pre-interview where they shared their current interests towards and experiences in sewing. In the second phase, participants completed an independent activity workbook that contained 4 stepwise exercises. These exercises encouraged reflection on their current sewing process, conceptual mapping, and ideation and sketching. The workbook was completed over a 3-day period. The third and final phase took part on the 5th day. This was a post-interview that engaged the participant in expanding upon the activities they'd completed in their workbooks. We collected 24 clothing sketches, which we name Expressive Clothing, and used this to base our analysis using open coding over 2 passes. We first focused on looking for evidence towards what information was communicated, who the information was being communicated to, why the information was being communicated, and how the information was being communicated. We then considered the relationships between these 4 factors. We found that all our participants showed an interest in embedding meaning or information into the clothes they created. We uncovered a set of 5 approaches that linked how hobbyist sewers wanted to communicate information, what encodings they used, what information they wanted to communicate, and why they wanted to communicate it. These 5 communication approaches are evolutionary, minimalistic, conversation starters, elusive, and understanding. In this presentation, I'll highlight 2 of these approaches. The first approach I'll highlight is evolutionary communication. This approach consists of designing clothes that communicate information that changes over time. This could be through manual growth and removal, or through automated changes using electronics or interactive components. Clothes that were designed using this approach were often meant to be public-facing, and were used for educating others or raising awareness. One example of manual evolution that we saw was in this dress by P7. This dress contains detachable pieces, like the sleeves and the hem, that can be removed and reattached elsewhere. Using this approach, P7 designed a dress that can be worn in multiple different forms to shed light on the harms of fast fashion. One example of automatic evolution that we saw was in this shirt by P3. This shirt contains embedded LEDs and proximity sensors so that the base fabric gains color upon close contact with others to demonstrate the spread of illnesses. The second approach I'll highlight is elusive communication. This approach consisted of designs that aimed to embed individuals' feelings and emotions through smaller, less noticeable details. These designs were meant to be reminders for the creator themselves, and so they were often more abstract in their encoding choices. For example, P1 created a Snuggie-like hoodie that aimed to provide warmth and comfort during a tough personal time of loss. They wanted to create a comfort object for themselves, but didn't want to publicize the more intimate details of their situation with anyone who might view the item. We also saw some examples of designs that applied multiple communication approaches. For example, P10 designed a pair of pants where they added a unique stitch to the hemline for each hike they went on. This demonstrated the evolutionary and understanding communication approaches since the narrative on the pants developed over time. P10 envisioned these pants to serve as a data visualization that can allow viewers to learn something about them and potentially relate to their experiences. To explain the second half of our results related to challenges when designing expressive clothing, let's return to Abby. Abby's interested in designing a t-shirt that visualizes the spread of invisible illnesses such as COVID-19. She has recently learned about e-textiles, and so she wants to incorporate them to create a dynamic, evolutionary, expressive t-shirt. In order to visualize the invisible spread of an illness, Abby faces a series of challenges. First, she must determine how she can map her ideas to encodings and what colors, icons, or other details would best communicate her idea. She determines that one possible option is to integrate colors that are often associated with healthcare. So she considers the inclusion of the color red, which is often seen on emergency vehicles and hospital signs, and its related tints and shades in the range of pinks and oranges. In our study, 8 participants discussed the potential for mapping or encoding galleries or automated suggestions based on user-selected themes to help them overcome this challenge. Second, she has to visualize how her design will look in terms of what shape or style it'll take and how her information will be shown. Seeing that illnesses are often spread through touch, Abby opts to design a long-sleeve t-shirt. She hopes this design choice will allow people to make the connection between the most outward-facing limb of the human body and methods through which illnesses are often contracted. In terms of visualizing her information, she's intrigued by the potential for e-textiles to communicate dynamic information. She thinks lights could be an interesting approach to allow for dynamicity while also creating something that'll catch other people's attention. In our study, 6 participants said that relying on sketching for visualizing encodings like fabric type and garment structure was challenging, and 3 participants further talked about the challenges of visualizing designs that integrated electronics and dynamic components. Third, Abby must determine how to combine all of her ideas and mappings onto a single piece of clothing. She considers possible ways to integrate the factors of color choice, clothing choice, and dynamic information. In our study, 8 participants discussed currently using tools like Pinterest for gathering ideas and inspiration. But, like Abby, they also highlighted how combining multiple existing ideas into a single cohesive design is difficult. Lastly, Abby decides she wants her t-shirt to visualize patches of color based on the proximity of the wearer to other individuals, and she determines the best way to do this is to stitch the base t-shirt out of an LED-lined fabric that is activated using sensors. But, due to her lack of technical skills and awareness of available resources when it comes to e-textiles, she must also find a way to source a custom LED-lined fabric or learn the technical skills needed to build her own. In our study, 4 participants highlighted a desire to create custom encodings, but discussed having little knowledge on how or where they could make these themselves. After overcoming these 4 challenges, Abby is able to visualize her t-shirt that demonstrates how illnesses might spread within the public sphere. Through her design, Abby hopes to educate others and raise awareness about how an invisible illness spreads, and she hopes that these visualizations can encourage the general public to be more aware and cautious when out and about. As the information portrayed on her t-shirt is constantly changing based on where and around whom the wearer is, Abby's shirt is an example of applying the evolutionary communication approach. Lastly, we also consider the implications presented by our identified communication approaches and design challenges. We highlight relationships that exist among these challenges and approaches as they relate to 4 crucial aspects of the design and sewing processes. The first aspect is gathering inspiration and breaking down the information to communicate. The second is selecting appropriate encoding mechanisms for the individual parts of information that are to be conveyed. The third is considering designing with aesthetics in mind, particularly from the perspectives of wearability and social acceptability. And the fourth is finding avenues for producing expressive clothing, particularly for the creation of unique custom encodings. In this talk, I'll discuss the third implication, but I encourage you to visit our paper to read about the other 3. Our participants had 3 key considerations when designing expressive clothing: their wearability, their social acceptability, and their overall visual appearance. These 3 factors were equated to their willingness to wear expressive clothing and the aesthetic appeal of the garment itself. Even with personal motivations behind designing their expressive clothes, participants remained conscious of how their finished design would look and how they'd be perceived. These considerations present many opportunities for the design of future technologies that support expressive clothing design. For example, we can build on insights from psychology that discuss how people perceive different encodings like colors, lines, and patterns. These practices are already seen and applied in other similar social-facing practices like typography and architecture, where objects are altered to convey or invoke particular feelings. Returning to Abby, these understandings about how different forms and shapes are perceived could have helped her select the most appropriate and attention-drawing encoding form for her color patches. Similar guidances can be provided when it comes to the integration of interactive or electronic encodings. For example, in Abby's design, she likely would have appreciated some guidance when it came to what dynamic options exist for conveying her ideas. Some examples, like LED strips versus LEDs, could have helped Abby determine the best suited option for her design. Understanding what options exist, how accessible they are, and the advantages and disadvantages they present can impact the individual's choice of encoding mechanism, especially when the creator is less familiar with the techniques being explored. These guidances can be further extended towards considerations like where should encodings be placed to ensure they remain removable and can be updated as required, and how should components be integrated to maintain garment usability and washability. The inclusion of such a variety of encodings can support increased expression and consideration of the who, what, why, and how behind information communication on clothing. In conclusion, we contribute an initial understanding of Hobbyist-Sewers' desires to use fabric as a medium for communicating information, and we extend these understandings to highlight how we might design technological tools to support such a design process. We conducted a formative user study with 12 participants, gathered 24 expressive clothing sketches, identified 5 distinct communication approaches used to express information through clothing, identified 4 challenges participants envision encountering in their design process, and discussed a set of implications for the design of future technologies to support designing expressive clothing. Thank you.